Muslim societies were on the move. Whether for pilgrimage or trade or education, people traveled by caravan over land and by boat over sea. And they brought with them their ideas, stories, customs, and material objects, exchanging these in a world that grew increasingly complex and cosmopolitan as a result of these human interactions and far-reaching commercial networks. This map shows the routes taken by the famed 14th century writer Ibn Battuta. Setting out from Morocco at the age of 21, he went across North Africa to the Arabian Peninsula, Iran, Afghanistan, South Asia, eventually reaching China. He was in many respects like Leo Africanus, whose story you can read in the Connected Histories portion of the Muslim Journeys bookshelf. Muslims are obliged to make the pilgrimage, called the Hajj, to Mecca once in their lifetimes if they are able. The Hajj is an extraordinary event occurring each year in which Muslims from all over the world converge in the sacred city of Mecca in present-day Saudi Arabia, typically arriving in large convoys. There they perform a series of ritual acts that include donning white garments, drinking from the Zamzam well where Abraham's wife Hagar miraculously found water in the desert, and then circumambulating the black textile-draped Kaaba. The Kaaba is an ancient cubical stone structure built by Abraham according to Muslim belief. The pilgrimage was long and dangerous, and illustrated handbooks were written to guide the travelers along the route and also within the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. So, for example, the handbook with this picture of a sea crossing advises pilgrims to avoid ships that are overloaded and tells them how to store their luggage and deal with seasickness. Also, when needed, that they should help bail water out of the boats. We see the ships, which travel in fleets. Loaded with passengers, their colorful sails billow as sailors handle the ropes. The Hajj was a profoundly important religious event where Muslims from all over the world met, united in common religious ritual. During the day, they performed their ritual prayers and their ritual acts, but one can imagine the scene at night when strangers gathered in tents by the side of a fire, exchanging stories, recipes, foods, and then at the end of the Hajj, it concluded with a 2-day trade fair where people swapped books, textiles, gems, all sorts of things that were then carried back to their home countries. Whether traveling for religion or commerce, people had not only guidebooks, but also maps and other navigational instruments to help them, such as the astonishingly accurate set of maps of the Mediterranean made by the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis. Astrolabes were portable instruments for determining direction, useful both for travelers like Ibn Battuta, but also simply for determining the correct direction of oriented prayer. Also helping travelers was a fairly well-established network of roads. All around the Mediterranean, there were stone-paved roads that had been built in the Roman imperial period, and some of them were still usable at the dawn of the Muslim era in the 7th century. But by then, roads had lost their importance because the Arabs did not generally use wheeled transport. Instead of wagons, they relied on camels and horses, as pictured in this scene of pilgrims returning from the Hajj. So when we speak of roads, it is the presence of a well-marked, relatively safe route that mattered more than a paved surface. By about the 12th century, some well-traveled trade routes in the central and eastern Islamic lands had the added amenity of roadside inns called caravanserais. In the caravanserai, such as the one seen in this drawing, travelers could stop to pass the night in the walled safety of a solidly built enclosure. The caravanserais typically had monumental portals, a sign of welcome visible from a distance, beckoning the travelers to enter. There, they could stable animals in a compound protected from marauders, and they would find a water well, prayer hall, a kitchen serving food, and maybe even entertainment. These inns were often built and subsidized by the Sultan in order to protect traders and to promote commerce. You can still see lots of caravanserais today lining the modern highways of Turkey and Iran, spaced at about a distance of a day's ride by camel. There were urban inns as well, such as this example in Granada, Spain. These were secure buildings organized around an interior courtyard and usually located near the city markets where the merchants conducted their business. Of course, the road and caravanserai network served both traders and pilgrims, facilitating the long-distance travel of people, carrying with them both ideas and objects. The Silk Road, which connected East Asia through Iran to the Mediterranean for 2 millennia, was improved by the building of these caravanserais. The route allowed first the import of silk from China, but then it became the conduit by which the actual silkworms and silk-making technique were acquired. The trade of a highly prized object thus led to the acquisition of a new cultural practice. Ceramics, such as valuable porcelain, were also imported from China. Porcelain was made of a strong clay body with lots of minerals requiring high-temperature firing in the kiln. The result is a vessel with very thin, often translucent walls, elegant but fragile. This 15th century manuscript shows golden and blue and white glazed porcelain being brought from China westward into Islamic lands. The cart looks like it has shock absorbers, but the mule driver still looks worried. Until porcelain clay was acquired for use in Muslim ceramic workshops, Muslim collectors either had to import the vessels from distant China or accept imitations made of a much cruder earthenware clay, such as this bowl. The bowl's clay body is not actually white, but it has been glazed to appear as if it were. On the Art Spots pages of the Muslim Journeys website, you can read Ibn Battuta's description of seeing porcelain in China. Like many a traveler, he marveled at how inexpensive it was in the local markets. We've seen that along with materials and techniques, Muslim travelers also exchanged artistic values and concepts. This 16th century Persian painting shows clear influences from East Asia. Specifically, the highly stylized rolling clouds reflect Chinese ways of representing landscape. Finally, in addition to the more permanent arts of painting, ceramics, and textiles, the ephemeral arts of plants, spices, and foods also traveled. Pilgrims and others often collected plant cuttings and seeds as they went about, introducing those plants into new landscapes and finally into new culinary dishes. In 11th century Spain, when court botanists were given seeds for superior varieties of fig and pomegranate from Syria, they immediately set about domesticating the trees for their local orchards. When the Iraqi singer Ziryab, and he was the rock star of his time, when he moved to Spain in the 9th century, he was the first to gather and eat wild asparagus there, maybe because he had already learned to do so in Iraq. Similarly, in 12th century Yemen, the Sultan sent away for coconut and mango trees, grape varietals, rice, and other rare plants from foreign sources. But in many cases, one didn't even have to send away for exotic plants. The markets of cities like Cordoba, Damascus, Baghdad, and Fez offered a rich variety of foods and spices, as well as art objects, from around the known world. So we've seen that roads and caravanserais facilitated travel and the trade of ordinary and luxury goods, as well as for Hajj travel. Networks of communication meant that the Islamic world was culturally diverse, with patrons from Spain to India able to enjoy fine porcelains, silk, spices that were appreciated all the more for their exotic origins.
Islamic Art Spots are a presentation of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Bridging Culture's bookshelf, Muslim Journeys, is a presentation of the National Endowment for the Humanities in cooperation with the American Library Association. Support for this program was provided by a grant from Carnegie Corporation of New York, with additional support for art and media components from the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art. To further explore the Islamic Art Spots and the Bridging Culture's bookshelf, Muslim Journeys, visit the Muslim Journeys website